Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 191. General Rizel and Rosalie Greenwood. The elves won the battle and the king managed to restore his reputation, but Garendel wasn't happy with their victory. The presence of the goblin monarch in the colony weighed heavily on his mind. Just one goblin monarch almost took care of Elder Egres and Elder Sunset. If there are more of them, I don't think my Greenwood Kingdom could handle it. The Greenwood Kingdom had 3 three-ringed beast soul masters and 4 transcendent knights. Garendel was afraid that the goblin colony was hiding more goblin monarchs. If there were more than 5 of them, then it would be a disaster. Just thinking about it made him unsettled. After cleaning up the battlefield, Garendel and the elven warriors returned to their kingdom. There was no celebration for their victory and the atmosphere was gloomy. Garendel summoned all the highest-ranking elves of the kingdom to his treehouse for another meeting. This time no one made a fuss. Even Egres, who was usually against the king, was strangely obedient. With the exception of Neo, who was with the princess, all the powerful figures of the elven kingdom had gathered at this treehouse. I believe our messengers had already told you about what happened in the battle, but I will explain the situation for the sake of those who have not been informed. Garendel told everyone what had transpired, including the encounter with the goblin monarch and how it had almost killed Elder Sunset and Elder Egres. Everyone listened to his words with stern faces. Your Majesty, from your words, are you implying that there could be more goblin monarchs in the colony? Asked a white-haired elf with a slender physique. This elf was the commander of the king's guards, General Rizel, a transcendent knight. He was also the king's younger brother. He might look like a weak and helpless elf, but this man was the very example of the quote, "Don't judge a book by its cover." General Rizel was the most skilled swordsman in the kingdom. In terms of pure skill alone, he was miles ahead of Elder Dahan, who mostly relied on his brute strength. This has not been verified yet, but I am mostly certain that there are more goblin monarchs in the colony, Garendel replied with a grim tone, his words making everyone feel alarmed. General Rizel frowned. Even he wasn't confident that he could handle a goblin monarch on his own. If your Majesty's guess is right, then wouldn't we be in danger if we continue fighting with those monsters? The one who had spoken this time was an elven woman with green hair. She was the 4th transcendent knight of the kingdom and also their strongest warrior, the guardian of the forest, Rosalie Greenwood. She was a warrior who was close to advancing to the next realm, so everyone in the kingdom respected her. She was also the late elven king's younger sister, so she had higher seniority than Garendel, who was the current king. Despite her advanced age, she managed to preserve her youthful appearance. She was almost 2 centuries old, but she looked like someone in her early 30s. Garendel stared at her and nodded as he replied. The moment they set their sights on our Mana Spring, our kingdom was already in danger. Now we have no choice but to fight them. Rosalie's expression remained unchanged. If Her Highness returns with the human warriors, then things would be more manageable. Elder Dahan suddenly spoke. He was one of the elves who disliked humans, but given the current circumstances, he couldn't afford to be choosy anymore. Just what kind of help can they offer? I don't think a countryside barony can offer us much assistance. Egres scoffed in disdain. He just couldn't bring himself to accept help from someone he hated. Elder Egres, mind your words. Her Highness is doing her best to get us some help. You should set aside your hatred for once. Elder Sunset glared at him. Egres snorted and crossed his arms without saying anything. Silence! Shouted Garendel. He then told them how they should proceed with the battle, but then a messenger suddenly came and reported. Your Majesty, Her Highness has arrived with the human warriors. They are heading to the kingdom as we speak. Hearing this, everyone revealed different emotions. Some were relieved, while others were worried. There were also a few who expressed anger, including Ygritte. "All right, you may leave." Garendel waved his hand. He was relieved to hear that his daughter was finally back. He couldn't wait to see her, and he was also curious about the humans that she had brought. "Everyone, why don't we meet our guests?" he suggested while scanning everyone's faces. "A good idea, Your Majesty. I want to see what kind of warriors a small barony has to offer." Ygritte smiled coldly. Everyone present could sense the contempt in his tone. The rest also expressed their desire to see the human warriors. And so, the meeting was temporarily put on hold. The king and the high elves left the treehouse and headed to the central square to wait for the arrival of their visitors. After slightly over an hour of waiting, Ivana's group and the warriors of the three houses finally arrived. Ivana was taken aback when she saw her father and the high elves waiting at the central square. She turned her gaze to Alaric and warned him. "Alaric, all the high-ranking elves are here, including my father. You all must be cautious when speaking with them. Some of these elves do not like humans." Hearing this, Alaric nodded. "I understand. We will be careful." He gave his father a knowing glance as he said those words. Ivana looked over to Lucas and said, "Lord Lucas, please bring the Transcendent Knights with you. I will introduce you all to the High Elves." Lucas nodded indifferently. "All right," he responded. "Alaric, you should come too." Ivana smiled at Alaric. "Yes, Your Highness," Alaric replied jokingly. Ivana chuckled and shook her head at his teasing look. Chapter 192, Rosalie's Attributes. Ivana brought them to the High Elves and made the introductions. "I have returned, everyone. I apologize for making you wait." Ivana exchanged greetings with her father and the High Elves before she introduced the humans she brought. "Everyone, this is Lord Lucas. He is the Patriarch of House Silversword. This is Sir Galliner. This gentleman is Sir Warwick, and this is the heir of House Silversword, Lord Alaric." Garendel and the High Elves were surprised. They didn't expect that a countryside barony in the north actually had 3 transcendent knights. These men are powerful, especially that person. Garendel stared deeply at Lucas. He felt a suffocating pressure from him, which he only felt when facing Rosalie. It wasn't just him. The rest of the High Elves were also shocked when they sensed Lucas' aura. He had concealed it well, but these High Elves were very sensitive to mana, so they quickly discovered Lucas' overwhelming power. So that must be the human who saved her. He is indeed impressive for someone his age. Garendel thought to himself as he looked at Alaric. "I know you all are weary from your trip, but the situation is urgent. Please follow us. I will fill you in with the details." The Elven King spoke. "All right." Lucas calmly nodded his head. Suddenly, he sensed a sharp gaze directed at him. He turned his head and saw one of the High Elves looking at him with undisguised disgust. That High Elf must be one of those guys that Ivana has mentioned. Lucas thought to himself as he pulled his gaze away from this particular elf. Meanwhile, Galliner approached Alaric and whispered to his ears. "My lord, I think these elves despise us. Do you want me to straighten them out?" His voice wasn't loud, but everyone was an expert, so they heard him clearly. Alaric didn't expect the calm Galliner to say those words. He usually ignored such blatant behavior, but it seemed like he was offended by the arrogance of the elves. Everyone subconsciously stopped in their tracks and the atmosphere slowly became tense. Garendel was about to speak when a mocking voice drifted into his ears. "Look at this guy acting tough." Unsurprisingly, it was Ygritte. Galliner stared at him and uttered while shaking his head. "For a 3-ringed beast soulmaster, your aura is not impressive." "What did you say?" Ygritte was furious. Just as things were about to escalate, Rosalie decided to intervene. "Ygritte." Her cold voice sent a shiver down Ygritte's spine. Other than Elder Sunset, the one he feared the most was this woman. Meanwhile, Alaric tapped Galliner's shoulder. "That is enough, Sir Galliner." Galliner realized his mistake and immediately apologized with a bow of his head. "I was rude." Garendel immediately stepped in and said, "All right, we did not gather here to make enemies. Let us not embarrass ourselves in front of the residents. The situation settled down with the Elven King's words. He then brought everyone to the treehouse and told the humans about the present situation. So there are goblin monarchs in the colony. Alaric frowned upon hearing this information. Before we continue, I just want to tell your majesty that I have already offered them all the beast soul crystals we can get from this battle. Also, Ivana explained what she had promised to House Silversword. When everyone heard this, some elves reacted strongly. Your Highness, trading with them is one thing, but wouldn't it be too much to give them all the beast soul crystals? General Rizel asked with a frown. Some elves agreed with his words. Ivana stared at him and responded with a cold voice. General Rizel, what is more important to you? Our kingdom or those beast soul crystals? General Rizel sensed her displeasure, but he didn't care since those beast soul crystals could provide quite the boost to their warriors. I understand your point, Your Highness. The kingdom is indeed more important, but to protect our land, we need to make our warriors stronger. Those beast soul crystals will be crucial in strengthening our military. General Rizel is right. Why should we give up all the beast soul crystals when they only brought a few hundred soldiers? Igris chimed in. Ivana's eyes flashed with anger. General Rizel spoke with the kingdom in his best interest, but Igris spoke out of spite. Just then, a dagger suddenly flew and struck the table, just a few inches from Igris' hands. Everyone nervously glanced at Rosalie, who had thrown the dagger. One more word from you and my dagger will hit your head next. She spoke in a detached and cold tone. No one dared to say anything, not even the king. As for Igris, his face was drenched in sweat. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He could only nervously smile in response. Seeing that he was cooperative, Rosalie turned her gaze toward Ivana and General Rizel. All the beast soul crystals will be given to the humans. She then swept her gaze over the crowd and asked in a flat tone, "Are there any objections?" No one uttered a word. Seeing how domineering she was, Ivana's eyes flashed with admiration. "I will take your silence as a yes." She then moved her gaze to Garandel and told him, "Now tell us your plan." Hearing this, Garandel cleared his throat before he opened his mouth. "Now that we have gained 3 more transcendent knights." While the Elven King was talking, Alaric secretly used his appraisal trait on the domineering elf. Rosalie Greenwood, Transcendent Knight EXP, 4901/5000. Potential, B.
Trait, Dagger Mastery, S. Close Combat, S. Assassination, S. Orsebacridin, A. Intigne, A. Tracking, A. Intimidation, B. Camouflage, B. Poison Mastery, C. Danger Perception, C. Intuition, D.
Strength, 249. Stamina, 249. Agility, 388. Vitality, 184. Endurance, 199. Mana, 217. Rosalie seemed to have sensed his scrutiny and gave him a deep look. This woman is scary strong. Alaric smiled at her, but she ignored him and looked away. Seeing this, Alaric bitterly shook his head. Chapter 193. Secure the Mountain Pass. The next day before the sun had risen, the Elven army together with the army of the 3 northern houses left the kingdom. Their main objective this time was to secure the mountain pass between the kingdom and the goblin colony. It was a strategic location that could give them a huge advantage in the next battle. However, there was one big problem. This mountain pass was guarded by an army of 5,000 goblins, and there might even be another goblin monarch taking charge of them. To secure the mountain pass, they planned to launch a sneak attack on the goblin camp. To do this without being discovered, they needed to move on foot and utilize the forest to camouflage themselves. They covered their armor with leaves, and they even smeared their bodies with green paste to mask their smell. At this moment, Alaric was following the battalions led by his father and Neo. They were moving stealthily and no one dared to utter a sound. To communicate, they only used hand signals. "We are getting closer." Alaric lifted his head and looked up at the top of the mountain. From his position, he could see the wooden watchtowers and the walls that surrounded the goblin camp. Suddenly, Lucas raised his hand and gestured something while keeping his eyes in a certain direction. 15 enemies are coming. That was what Lucas was telling them through his hand gestures. After informing them about the incoming enemies, Lucas made a series of hand gestures. It was a signal for the archers to prepare for action. The rest of the soldiers crouched as they slowly walked through the dense forest. Meanwhile, the archers knocked their arrows, took aim, and waited for the enemies to arrive. In the next moment, a group of goblin warriors finally came into view. They looked like normal goblin warriors based on their appearance and their aura. As soon as they arrived, Lucas made a snapping sound with his fingers. It was the signal for the archers to release their arrows. Su, 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 su. Dozens of arrows were released and struck the oblivious goblin warriors, turning them into sieves. They couldn't even emit a sound as they were killed instantly. Neo and the elven warriors watched this scene without intervening. They wanted to see how the humans would handle the situation, and the results made them satisfied. Neo gave a nod of approval. He felt that they had handled things well. The group took care of the corpses to prevent the goblins at the camp from identifying the scent. After handling the corpses, they silently walked toward the foot of the mountain, where they encountered another group of goblin sentries which were quickly eliminated by the archers. One might wonder why they were being cautious when they had many transcendents. The main reason for this was that they wanted to minimize their casualties as much as possible. The 2 battalions ascended the mountain. The path was steep and full of sharp rocks, so everyone had to be careful. Once they were over halfway to the top, Lucas nodded to Neo. The high elf understood his intentions and made a series of hand gestures to his subordinates. Meanwhile, Lucas also instructed his subordinates to take out their bows in preparation for the next step of their plan. Now we wait for the signal. Alaric knocked his arrow and aimed at the goblin base camp on top of the mountain. Everyone was waiting for the signal to release the arrow. The signal will be sent by the Elven King himself to make sure that everyone will attack at the same time. Everyone waited with bated breath. A few minutes later, a burning arrow shot into the sky. Now! Lucas and Neo shouted at the same time. As soon as they gave the command, everyone released their arrows. Su, 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 su. The sun hadn't risen yet, so the goblins inside the camp failed to notice the incoming arrows. Eek! Eek! The screams of the goblins soon echoed, but everyone didn't stop from firing their arrows. Everyone didn't stop until they had emptied their quiver. Soon, another burning arrow was released into the sky. It was the signal to commence the third and final step of their plan, to kill the goblins that had survived the barrage of arrows. Charge! Lucas and Neo shouted as they led their battalions to the goblin base camp. Alaric unsheathed his rare steel sword and the custom-made short sword as he charged toward the mountaintop. When they reached the top of the mountain, they saw a large number of goblin corpses nailed to the ground with arrows piercing through their bodies. Some of these goblins were still alive, but Lucas and Neo's battalions quickly put an end to their misery. More enemies inside the camp! Lucas shouted. He then waved his sword, releasing a powerful wind blade that destroyed the wooden gates of the goblin camp. Bang! Inside the camp were more goblin corpses, but many goblin warriors had survived the volley of arrows. Upon seeing the intruders, the scared goblins froze. It was only when the hobgoblins appeared that they managed to gather their wits. Kill them all! Lucas pointed his sword toward the surviving goblins. He didn't sense any powerful aura, so he decided to let his subordinates take care of the remaining monsters. Alaric rushed toward the hobgoblins and brandished the rare steel sword. Whoosh! 2 hobgoblins immediately died in just one swing. He then used the custom-made short sword to deflect the attacks coming his way. Clang! Clang! After casually blocking the attacks, Alaric swung the rare steel sword and released a flurry of attacks. Whoosh! Whoosh! With every swing, multiple goblins were killed. Even the stronger hobgoblins couldn't last a single blow. In just a few seconds, all the goblins and hobgoblins that blocked his path had been killed. Alaric rested while observing as the human and the elven warriors cleared the battlefield. It was an easy victory. Chapter 194, Goblins employing traps? The officers of the 4 battalions tasked to secure the mountain pass gathered for a meeting. Now that we have taken over this location, we have the advantage in the upcoming war, said Garandel with a stern look. That is true, but your majesty, do you not find it suspicious? Neo spoke with a baffled expression. What do you mean? The Elven King asked with a frown. Neo took a deep breath before he replied. The mountain pass is supposed to be a strategic point, but the colony didn't even send a single goblin chieftain to protect it. I had my men check the corpses and all of them are goblins and hobgoblins. Hearing this, everyone's faces fell. It was indeed suspicious. The Elven King nodded in agreement. He was also baffled by this arrangement. Why didn't the colony send a powerful goblin to guard the mountain? I think this is a trap. Lucas suddenly spoke. His words made everyone stare at him in surprise. Sensing their gazes, Lucas explained why he had said those words. From the information we gathered, the colony will send their troops here since it is the shortest route toward the kingdom. However, what if that was not their plan all along? While saying those words, he pointed to the path beneath the mountain. That is just your speculation, but if you are right, then it could affect our plans. General Rizel crossed his arms while rubbing his chin. Garandel glanced at General Rizel and instructed. General, send your subordinates to the other battalions and inform them about the situation here. Yes, your majesty. General Rizel saluted before he turned around and left. Meanwhile, Alaric just stood there in silence. He looked like he was deep in his thoughts. Are goblins capable of making a diversion tactic like this? That should not be possible. Even the goblin monarchs are not smart enough to formulate this tactic. He found the whole situation strange. Goblins were known for their aggressive behavior and greed, but they were stupid. They didn't even know how to utilize the most basic battle formations. Just what is going on here? Meanwhile, in another strategic location, a fierce battle was taking place between 4 battalions of elves and more than 10,000 goblin warriors. Damn it! We have been fooled. Their real target was not the mountain pass. Elder Igris cursed under his breath as he watched the large number of goblins that had surrounded them. How were they able to come up with this trap? When did the goblins become so smart? Elder Dahan was also stunned. The goblins actually set up a trap for them, and they even employed a crescent formation which prevented their troops from retreating. While they were starting to panic, Rosalie sent Sunset a glance and told her, "Release the distress signal." Elder Sunset nodded upon hearing her words. She then pulled her bowstring, summoned a thunder arrow, and aimed it toward the sky. She then imbued the thunder arrow with more mana before releasing it into the air. So, the huge thunder arrow shot to the clouds before it exploded with a loud boom. Boom! Now, let us break through this encirclement and hold on until reinforcements arrive, Rosalie shouted. Yes, Grand Elder. Under their leadership, they gathered their troops to break the encirclement and create a path for them to retreat. The large swarm of goblins exhausted the elven warriors, but they fought relentlessly, unwilling to surrender to the beasts. Rosalie wielded her daggers with extreme precision and great speed. She moved so fast that it looked like she had turned into a mirage. With her at the front, a small gap was created and the elven warriors fiercely fought to widen this gap, providing them with enough room to escape. Just as they were about to break through the enemy formation, 20 goblin chieftains and 4 goblin monarchs appeared in front of them. The presence of these powerful monsters made them feel alarmed. Igris and Sunset, who had experienced the strength of a goblin monarch, trembled at the sight of the monsters. Do not falter. They might be powerful, but they are not invincible. Rosalie's cold voice drifted into their ears, making them regain their sense of clarity. Follow me. I will show you that those monsters bleed too. Rosalie fearlessly lunged at the group of powerful goblins. Seeing this, Dahan and Sunset immediately followed. Rosalie's figure seemed to have disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was already in front of a goblin monarch who was holding a bone spear. In the next moment, she swung her daggers with unbelievable speed and left afterimages in her wake. Whoosh! 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 The goblin monarch revealed a look of surprise. It lifted its spear to block her daggers, but it wasn't able to react in time. Rosalie's daggers slashed the monster, leaving lacerations all over its body. When she was about to land the finishing blow, she sensed a feeling of danger behind her. HM? She quickly turned her body and saw a giant axe zooming past her face. Bang! The axe failed to hit her and struck the ground hard with a bang. Bang! The goblin monarch who had been slashed by her daggers staggered and let out a groan. I will take care of 2 of them. You guys deal with the remaining 2. Rosalie commanded with a serious voice. Yes, Grand Elder. The 3 elders responded. While they were fighting with the goblin monarchs, their subordinates also engaged with the goblin chieftains in battle. More and more elven warriors fell after being encircled by the monsters. If they couldn't break through this encirclement, they would be trapped and end up being killed. Suddenly, a powerful aura burst forth, and when they turned their heads, they saw a huge human warrior tearing through the goblins' formation. With every swing of his broadsword, more than 10 goblins fell. Chapter 195. On the verge of collapse. It's him. So he's that powerful. Elder Igris was stunned when he saw the transcendent human bulldozing his way through the enemy formation. He was like a meat grinder that tore apart the goblins that blocked his path. He swung the 2-handed broadsword with such ease that it looked like he was wielding a light weapon. Not far from this transcendent human was another figure. He was an older warrior wielding a double-bladed spear. Although he wasn't as ferocious as the other guy, he was stable and skilled. He didn't even need to use his mana to kill the goblins. With just a few casual strikes, the goblins fell under his blade. The sudden appearance of these 2 transcendent knights gave hope to the elven warriors. Our reinforcements are here. Quickly head toward them, Rosalie shouted to the elven warriors. Hearing her words, the elven warriors didn't hesitate. They released their remaining mana, strengthening themselves for this final push. At this moment, Rosalie was still occupied by the 2 goblin monarchs. Both monsters were formidable, so she couldn't afford to be careless. Meanwhile, Elder Sunset, Elder Igris, and Elder Dahan were fighting with the other 2 goblin monarchs. They held the advantage in numbers, but they couldn't even overpower the monsters. Elder Igris retracted his gaze from Galanor and focused his attention on the 2 goblin monarchs. With a stomp of his foot, he summoned multiple thorny vines that twisted like serpents as they lunged toward the monsters. The goblin monarchs weren't flustered upon sensing the vines. With just a few slashes of their weapons, the thick vines were cut into pieces and fell to the ground. Damn it! Just how powerful are these monsters? Elder Igris felt a wave of fatigue. He grabbed his aching head and forced himself to stand on his feet. He had depleted his mana and it was causing serious pain to his body, especially to his head. He could feel his heart throbbing erratically. Blood leaked out from his nose and he was starting to feel dizzy. Just as he was about to collapse from mana exhaustion, a sharp voice drifted into his ears. Igris. He weakly turned his head while wiping off the blood that was leaking out from his nose. He saw Elder Sunset, staring at him with a worried look. I am fine. His pride wouldn't allow him to look weak in front of her. Elder Sunset appeared at his side to check his condition, and she frowned upon discovering that his mana had been depleted. Why? You should have saved some of your mana to protect yourself. Elder Igris scoffed at her words. I am the rear support. How could I let our warriors die? He muttered. Elder Sunset was surprised to hear these words from him. This guy was arrogant and held humans in disdain, but he was caring for his fellow elves. Can you still walk? She asked, her voice softening. Elder Igris nodded, sweat trickling down his face. Stop worrying about me. I can take care of myself. He replied. Elder Sunset stared deeply at him and said, just stay behind me and recover your mana. We will need your help later. Hearing this, Elder Igris snorted. You don't need to tell me. She no longer bothered with him and focused on supporting Elder Dahan, who was holding back the 2 goblin monarchs. The poor transcendent elven warrior was already covered in blood. His heavy armor was torn in many places and his mana was also close to exhaustion. He looked even worse than Elder Igris. "Just hold on a bit longer, Elder Dahan," Elder Sunset shouted when she noticed his condition. The muscular elf didn't have the energy to respond. He was barely holding on. Just one strong blow was enough to take him down. The goblin monarchs also realized this, so they decided to focus their attacks on him. Under the fierce attacks of the monsters, Elder Dahan could only defend himself. He didn't even bother to go on the offensive. "My movements are starting to slow down. I can't hold on anymore. I'm tired." Due to his exhaustion, there was a momentary lapse in his defense which gave the goblin monarchs the chance to land a heavy blow to his abdomen. Arg! Elder Dahan was sent back a few meters and he almost fell to his knees because of the impact. The severe blow broke some of his ribs, making him grimace in pain. "Elder Dahan." He heard someone calling out his name, but his vision was starting to get blurry and his hearing was also affected. He spat another mouthful of blood, and this time he fell to his knees. He clutched his abdomen while keeping his eyes on the approaching goblin monarchs. He let out a weary sigh as he muttered, "I'm tired." He could no longer move his arms and standing up seemed so impossible. He tried to circulate his mana, but he could only release wisps of energy which was barely enough to keep his eyes open. Just then, a series of thunder arrows went past him and shot toward the goblin monarchs. Bang! 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 "Elder Dahan, stand up. I will buy you some time to retreat." Elder Dahan heard Elder Sunset's urgent voice, but he couldn't muster an ounce of strength from his body. "I'm sorry, Elder Sunset, but my body is no longer listening to me." "Igris, that piece of shit." Elder Dahan's lips curved upward. "Even that guy is cheering me on." He gritted his teeth and pushed his knee, forcing himself to get up. "I won't fall here," he shouted, blood trickling down the corner of his lips. With great difficulty he finally managed to stand up. So painful. His abdomen was screaming in pain and just standing on his feet was taking a great toll on his body. Chapter 196. Goblin Army Retreats. The two goblin monarchs immediately pounced at him while evading the thunder arrows released by Elder Sunset. "Bang! Bang! Bang! Elder Dahan!" she shouted in alarm as she watched the scene. "Not yet!" shouted Elder Dahan as he lifted his sword to block their attacks. Clang! Clang! As soon as their weapons clashed, Elder Dahan felt like his abdomen was being torn apart. Blood trickled down his lips. He endured the pain with gritted teeth while keeping himself standing. One of the goblin monarchs revealed an annoyed look. It poured mana into its arms and swung its weapon, a two-handed warhammer. Whoosh! Clang! Surprisingly, Elder Dahan still managed to block the warhammer, but everyone could see that he was reaching his limits. The other goblin monarch took the opportunity to stab him with its bone sword, but its attack was deflected by Elder Sunset's thunder arrow. After another round of battle, Elder Dahan fell heavily to the ground after being struck by the goblin monarch's warhammer. Bang! His armor had caved in, putting more pressure on his abdomen. Elder Dahan breathed heavily from exhaustion. He stared at the sky while waiting for his impending death. "I tried my best," he thought to himself. At the corner of his eyes, he saw the goblin monarch wielding a sword approach him. It then raised its bone sword while giving him a death stare. Just when it was about to stab his heart, a thorny vine suddenly emerged from the ground and wrapped around his body, squeezing him tightly. Elder Dahan was stunned when he saw this. He knew that it was Elder Igri's strongest integrated monster trait. "How? I thought he had exhausted his mana." He weakly turned his head and saw Elder Igris clutching his chest while controlling the thorny vine. The guy's eyes were bloodshot and his skin was showing signs of cracking. Mana overexertion. The cracking of Elder Igri's skin was the result of mana overexertion, and this could lead to severe consequences. Igris shouted as he slammed his hands to the ground, summoning more vines that rushed toward the captured goblin monarch. The vines tightly wrapped around the monster's body, squeezing the life out of it. It tried to escape from the vine's hold, but its arms had already been twisted beyond recognition. While this was happening, the goblin monarch wielding a war hammer tried to help its companion, but it couldn't break the thick vines. A few moments later, the goblin monarch finally died after its spine snapped from the strong constriction of the vines. After killing the monster, Elder Igris wobbled before he collapsed to the ground. Igris, Elder Sunset wanted to help him, but Elder Dahan was also in danger since one of the goblin monarchs was still alive. She immediately commanded an elven warrior to carry Elder Igris away. She then rushed to Elder Dahan's side to check his condition. He is breathing, but he is in terrible condition. She frowned. "HM?" She quickly grabbed Elder Dahan and retreated to the side. Whoosh! Bang! A war hammer struck the ground, sending stones and dirt flying in all directions. Elder Sunset was alarmed. If she hadn't reacted in time, they would have been turned into meat paste. Now that she was carrying Elder Dahan, she could no longer use her bow. "Damn it! We need help here." She ran as fast as she could, but the goblin monarch still caught up to her. It appeared before her, staring at her with its beastly eyes. "Despicable elves! I will kill you all!" The goblin monarch bellowed before it rushed toward her while lifting its war hammer. Upon gaining momentum, it swung its war hammer. Whoosh! Before it could hit them, a figure appeared in front of her and blocked the war hammer with his broadsword. Clang! "Leave this guy to me and retreat. The reinforcements will arrive soon." A calm voice drifted into her ears. Elder Sunset stared at the human warrior's broad back. She felt safe behind him. "Be careful," she muttered before she left while carrying Elder Dahan to safety. With the elves gone, Galliner focused his attention on the goblin monarch before him. Sensing his impassive gaze, the monster was unnerved. Its fighting spirit wavered momentarily, which gave Galliner the opportunity to land a deep slash to its chest. The goblin monarch immediately released its mana to strengthen its defenses and to stop the bleeding. In the next moment, the two fought relentlessly, exchanging heavy blows that caused violent shockwaves. Bang! Bang! Clang! Clang! The more they fought, the weaker the goblin monarch had become. It had been fighting with 3 powerful elves earlier, so it had used a huge portion of its mana. Meanwhile, Galliner's blows had become heavier as the battle progressed, and it could barely block his attacks. A while later, the monster lost its footing and Galliner took advantage of this. He lunged toward the creature and hacked its body with one heavy blow. SSS-KK. The goblin monarch tried to defend itself, but with its weakened mana, it was unable to block Galliner's full-powered strike. Galliner's broadsword cut through the goblin monarch's body, slicing it in half. After killing the monster, he didn't spare its corpse a second glance and went to help Rosalie, who was surrounded by 2 goblin monarchs, 4 goblin chieftains, and more than 10 hobgoblins. As if sensing his presence, the goblin monarch made a strange squeaking sound. Ike! Eek! Eek! The goblin army reacted to his call. They abandoned their targets and retreated without hesitation. Galliner frowned as he watched the goblins retreat. Did it sense our reinforcements? He thought to himself. Just then, he felt the ground trembling and the sound of the horses galloping echoed across the grasslands. It was their reinforcements, but they had come too late. The enemies had already retreated. "Thank you for your help." Rosalie approached him and gave him a grateful nod. "Amen," Galliner grunted in response. Chapter 197. Elder Sunset's Speculation. By the time the reinforcements arrived, the goblin army had already retreated. King Garandel's face fell when he saw the corpses of hundreds of elven warriors scattered all over the grassland. He felt a wave of sorrow. He was even familiar with some of those who had died. He could remember his conversations with them, and it made him even more heartbroken. "Your Majesty!" An elven warrior rushed to his side with an anxious look. King Garandel raised an eyebrow as he glanced at him. "Your Majesty, Elder Dahan is severely wounded and Elder Igris has overexerted his mana," the elven warrior reported. Hearing this, King Garandel's eyes widened. "Where are they?" He was stunned, but he had to maintain the dignity of a king. They are receiving treatment from the Beast Soul Warriors with healing integrated monster traits. The Elven Warrior replied. King Garendel nodded. He then turned his gaze to Neo and instructed him. Elder Neo, gather 20 of our best riders and chase after the goblins at a safe distance. We must find out where they are hiding. Once you discover their camp, return at once. Neo acknowledged the command with a nod of his head. Yes, Your Majesty. He didn't linger any further and left after choosing 20 riders. Meanwhile, King Garendel followed the Elven Warrior to check on Elder Dahan and Elder Igri's condition. They were being treated by 2 Beast Soul Warriors with healing traits. Your Majesty! Elder Sunset was the first one to notice his arrival. Everyone immediately greeted the king. Even those who were injured wanted to get up to greet him. However, King Garendel immediately waved his hand and said, At ease, everyone. He looked at Elder Sunset and nodded to her before he asked, How are they doing? Elder Sunset sighed while shaking her head. It is not good, Your Majesty. Elder Dahan broke some of his ribs and he almost depleted his mana. He also sustained numerous injuries in his body. He is still conscious, but he is in extreme pain. As for Elder Igris, his condition is much worse. He had overexerted his mana and he lost consciousness after killing a goblin monarch. King Garendel's expression hardened. He knew that it was fatal for a Beast Soul Warrior to overexert their mana. The Elven King took a deep breath to calm his nerves. We have been duped by those goblins. Their target was not the mountain pass, but this grassland. This grassland would lead to the western side of the Greenwood Kingdom. It was a longer route since one would have to take a few turns before they could reach the kingdom. Beyond this grassland, the goblins would have to travel to a forest infested by venomous snakes. Because of this, they all thought that the dumb goblins would choose to take the path toward the mountain pass. How many goblin monarchs did you encounter? The Elven King asked with a stern face. There were 4 goblin monarchs. Elder Sunset replied. 4? The Elven King frowned. Goblin monarchs were arrogant monsters and they were even hostile to their kind. While he was in deep thought, Elder Sunset's voice suddenly drifted into his ears. Your Majesty, is it possible that there is something else commanding those goblin monarchs? Garendel was stunned. To their knowledge, the goblin monarch was the final evolution form of the goblins. They were monsters with unparalleled physical strength and they also possessed high levels of mana. Furthermore, their intelligence was beyond that of the normal goblins. Now, what if this wasn't the final evolution form of the goblins? Just the thought of it made Garendel horrified. A single goblin monarch was already troublesome. What kind of creature was more powerful than that? That should not be possible. He didn't want to believe that such a creature existed. Elder Sunset furrowed her eyebrows and no longer pursued the matter. It was only speculation on her part and she had no definite proof that it existed. I think it is possible. A calm voice drifted into their ears. When they turned around, they saw that it was Lucas who had come with the military officers of the human warriors. What do you mean, Lord Lucas? King Garendel frowned. Lucas cleared his throat and shook his head as he replied. I am not saying this to scare you, but I have once read a book about a certain type of creature. The book said that goblin monarchs are merely the failed evolution form of a goblin chieftain. What? Everyone was in disbelief, including Alaric who had followed his father. He hadn't read anything about this, so he didn't know what Lucas was talking about. If a goblin monarch is merely a failed evolution form, then just how strong is one that has successfully evolved? The book was written by an unknown author, so it was only treated as hearsay, but some scholars believed it to be true. Lucas had read this book in the library of the imperial family. If this war hadn't occurred, he wouldn't have remembered having read that book. Can you describe the creature mentioned in the book? Another person appeared. It was the Grand Elder, Rosalie, who had just patched up her wounds. Lucas stared deeply at her and replied, the creature just looks like a typical goblin monarch, but it is on the slender side. It has pale green skin with red eyes. It has 2 horns on its head and 2 prominent sharp fangs. However, its most striking feature is the pair of wings on its back. Another thing that the book mentioned is the creature's strength. It says that the creature is close to catastrophe grade. Everyone gasped upon hearing this. Catastrophe grade monsters were creatures with unimaginable power. They possessed the strength that could destroy multiple cities. Mission update. Undersir. Mission: defeat the goblin colony. Mission difficulty: hard, extreme. A powerful creature has emerged in the goblin colony. Defeat the creature and destroy the goblin colony. Rewards: 1,500 battle points, 50 XP, 50 stat points, equipment upgrade card X1, random trait upgrade card X1. Penalty for failure: 2,000 battle points, minus 200 EXP. Chapter 198. The Goblin's Secret Camp. Alaric was dumbfounded when he saw the changes to his mission. So there is actually something above hard difficulty? All this time he thought that hard was the highest level of difficulty. Since the mission difficulty was adjusted, this means that the creature my father was talking about really exists. While he was absorbed in his thoughts, everyone was already scared by what Lucas had said. I also hope that this creature does not exist, but we must be prepared for the worst, Lucas remarked with a grim face. Suddenly, King Garendel seemed to have remembered something crucial. Wait, I sent Elder Neo to follow the goblins. Oh no! I sent Elder Neo to follow the escaping goblins to their camp. He no longer bothered to hide his anxiety. This was related to the safety of an important pillar of the kingdom. Everyone's expression changed. I am the fastest here, so I will go and get him, Rosalie volunteered. King Garendel nodded with a heavy look. Please bring them back safely, Grand Elder Rosalie. Rosalie took a deep breath and nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. She then turned around and left with great haste. After she left, Garendel shouted, Let us clean up the battlefield before we return to the kingdom. Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone helped with the cleanup to increase the efficiency. The possibility of there being a monster capable of commanding the goblin monarchs made everyone feel unsettled. Meanwhile, Neo's 20-man team had already caught up with the escaping goblin warriors. Just where are these things headed? He thought with a frown. They were about to enter a dangerous marsh inhabited by some of the most poisonous plant species. Few creatures dared to venture into this place. Even highly skilled elven warriors like him were always cautious when passing by this area. This was because there existed a highly dangerous plant that was so toxic that it could kill a transcendent with its venomous thorns. Thinking about this particular plant, Neo gestured at his men to be careful and to always watch their steps. The group had already left their mounts a long time ago, for this place wasn't ideal for riding. Neo marked the trees they had passed by to keep track of their location. They had already ventured deeper into the marshlands, and there was a high chance that they would be lost if they followed the goblins' trail without marking their path. A while later, they finally saw some form of settlement in the middle of the marshlands. The goblins used the trees that thrive in the area to create a simple camp surrounded by fences. Although the structures of the camp were simple, they noticed that there were thousands of goblin warriors staying in this camp. Go and observe their camp, but make sure that you will not be discovered, Neo commanded in a whispering voice. 10 elven warriors went to separate locations to observe the goblins' secret camp, while the remaining 10 remained. Just then, he suddenly noticed a goblin monarch patrolling near the fences of the camp. He immediately gestured at his men to conceal their aura. The goblin monarchs were very sensitive to mana, so just the slightest fluctuations would be sensed by them. While he was closely observing the goblins' secret camp, a hand suddenly grabbed his shoulder. He turned around and was surprised to see Rosalie. Grand Elder. Rosalie made a shushing gesture and said, We need to go back, Elder Neo. This place is dangerous. Elder Neo frowned. Half of his men had just left, so he couldn't leave. With a shake of his head, he replied, I can't, Grand Elder. Some of my men are still out there to make some observations on the goblin camp. Rosalie's face darkened. Elder Neo, this is an order from His Majesty. Neo calmly stared at her and remained firm in his decision. I know, but I can't just leave my subordinates here. Seeing how stubborn he was, Rosalie felt a little bit annoyed. With a cold voice, she muttered. The human warriors said that there might be a monster more powerful than a goblin monarch commanding the colony. Hearing this, the faces of Neo and the elven warriors abruptly changed. What? That's impossible. Neo found it ridiculous. We will stay here for a while and wait for them to return, but if they are not here within an hour, you must follow me. Rosalie spoke in a non-negotiable tone. Neo took a deep breath before he responded with a nod. All right. He could only pray that those elven warriors would return within an hour. While they were waiting, Rosalie observed the camp with her powerful vision. She sensed a large number of strong auras. She wanted to make a thorough investigation, but she didn't dare to observe the central parts of the camp. She was afraid that her aura would be noticed by the goblins, so she only inspected the outer parts of the camp. Just the outer layer of the camp, there are already more than 5 goblin monarchs. Though most of them are newly evolved, they are still a huge threat to us. She thought to herself, her expression becoming more unsightly. Although it hadn't been confirmed yet, she felt that there was a high possibility that Lucas was right. There was no way that the arrogant goblin monarchs would coexist this peacefully. An hour passed by just like that, but there was still no news from the elven warriors who had left earlier. Normally, they would be back within 30 minutes, but they have been gone for too long. Neo's face darkened. He felt that an accident had happened. Elder Neo, we must go back now before it is too late. I think your subordinates have been discovered by the goblins. Rosalie urged him. Hearing this, Neo turned his gaze toward the goblin camp and gritted his teeth. Let's return. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. They didn't want to stay in such a dangerous location for too long, especially after they heard Rosalie's words. Chapter 199. Returning to the Greenwood Kingdom. After making the decision, Neo and Rosalie returned to the grassland with the remaining 10 elven warriors. The mood was heavy, so no one spoke along the way. As soon as they got to the grassland, Neo and Rosalie reported what they had seen in the marshlands. Your Majesty, the goblins have set up camp in the marshlands. Neo spoke with a grim look. Until now, he still hoped that the 10 elven warriors they had left behind would return, even though he knew they were most likely dead. In the marshlands? Garendel frowned upon hearing this. He didn't expect that the goblins would actually build their camp in such a dangerous location. So what did you find out? How many goblin warriors are in that camp? He asked. Rosalie gestured to Neo, signaling to him that she would answer the question. I probed the goblins' camp and discovered more than 10,000 goblin warriors. I only observed the outer layer of their camp, so there might be more. Garendel frowned. It seems like we have underestimated the size of the goblin colony. It turns out that they have more warriors hidden in the marshlands. He muttered. Everyone waited for his decision. Garendel thought for a moment before he spoke. Let's go back to the kingdom. We need to make some changes in our strategy. With Dahan and Igris in critical condition, their military power was significantly weakened. Not to mention that many of their elite elven warriors had also fallen. Yes, Your Majesty. No one disagreed with the Elven King's decision. They also believed that it was wise to retreat given the losses that they had suffered. Forcing the attack would only lead to even greater casualties. The army created makeshift wagons using the trees from the nearby forest to transport the wounded soldiers. After cleaning up the battlefield, they returned to the Greenwood Kingdom with gloomy faces. They had won 2 battles, but no one was in the mood to celebrate. The fear of an even greater foe weighed heavily upon them. 2 days later, all the highest-ranking officers had gathered for an urgent meeting in the Elven King's treehouse. Alaric was also invited to the meeting, but because he was only an elite knight, he had no right to participate in the discussion. Just like the other officers present, his role was only to listen and later inform his subordinates about what the higher-ups would decide. Alaric had no objections to the arrangements. What should we do, Your Majesty? We can't let our soldiers step into the marshlands. Who knows what kind of poisonous plants are there? Sending our warriors there is no different than letting them go to commit suicide. There was a fierce discussion between the Transcendent Knights and the 3-ringed Beast Soul Masters. Meanwhile, Lucas, Warwick, and Galliner were silent the entire time. They only responded when someone asked them questions, but other than those instances, they didn't speak a word. "Silence!" shouted Garandel, his face looking grim. He then turned his gaze to Lucas and asked, "Do you have any opinion, Lord Lucas?" Everyone looked at him with serious faces. Although they had yet to see his power, they didn't dare take him lightly. Lucas rubbed his chin. Strategizing wasn't his strongest suit, but he still had plenty of experience in large-scale warfare. With their current situation, initiating the attack was simply a foolish move. He stood up and pointed at the battle map where the marshlands were located. "Our warriors are more skilled in land warfare and we prefer to fight as a cavalry. However, we cannot utilize our full potential in this location. In addition, your elven warriors are more adept at fighting in the forest with dense vegetation, but we can't make use of the trees in the marshlands due to the presence of the poisonous plants. In short, attacking the goblin camp will be disastrous for our army." Some people agreed with his words, while some contemplated deeply without revealing their emotions. "Here is what we can do." Lucas moved his finger to the area next to the marshlands. It was a dense forest inhabited by numerous wild beasts and monsters. "We can set up a trap here since this is the only safe exit from the marshlands. Furthermore, the forest is the perfect place for the elven warriors to showcase their abilities." Lucas told them his suggestion. Hearing this, Garandel drummed his fingers on the table, seemingly in deep thought. "His suggestion is straightforward, but it is also the best option for us." He was silent for a moment before he opened his mouth. "Is there anyone else with a better solution?" He scanned the people gathered, but no one spoke up. "In that case, we will proceed with Lord Lucas' suggestion." They discussed more about what kind of traps they would use and how they would distribute their forces. An hour later, the meeting finally concluded. When Alaric stepped out of the treehouse, he saw Ivana standing outside with a few elven ladies. She smiled upon seeing him while he smiled back in response. They didn't say anything to each other, but they felt like they had interacted with their eyes. "Don't you want to talk with her?" Lucas' voice drifted into his ears. Alaric was taken aback. "What are you talking about, my lord?" He forced a smile. Lucas gave him a knowing glance and snorted. "Stop acting innocent." Alaric could only shake his head with a nervous chuckle. "Let us talk about this when everything is over." Lucas no longer pursued the matter and headed to the treehouse arranged for him. Meanwhile, Alaric also headed to his treehouse. "Now that a more powerful enemy has emerged, I cannot afford to relax anymore. It is time to use that equipment upgrade card." Thinking about this, a notification appeared in front of him. "Do you want to use your equipment upgrade card on the selected item?" "Yes." "No. I can actually use it on this." Chapter 200 Epic Battle Armor. Alaric clicked yes. "Congratulations! You have upgraded your rare battle armor to Epic Battle Armor." Epic Battle Armor. Defense, 50. Durability, 50. There was no noticeable change in the appearance of the battle armor, but Alaric, who was wearing it, felt the sudden change in its weight and flexibility. Before the upgrade, the armor was a bit heavier. It was also a bit more difficult to move around, especially when he made abrupt turns and twists. However, those minor issues have been resolved. "Wow! It almost feels like I am just wearing a thick layer of clothes. It feels so comfortable to wear with no hint of awkwardness." He was satisfied with the improvement in his battle armor. Just the improved flexibility was already impressive. Let us test out the armor's durability. Maybe there are some changes in the engraved ability too. He couldn't wait to test it out. He unsheathed his custom-made short sword and tried stabbing through the armor with minimal force. When the sword's blade touched the armor, it slid off without even leaving a mark on the surface. Alaric applied more strength to the sword, but the same thing happened. "Amazing!" he exclaimed in his heart, his eyes shining with delight. "What if I apply mana to the short sword? Will it remain undamaged?" Thinking about this, Alaric imbued mana into the short sword and slashed his left arm guard. Clang! A dull clang echoed after the short sword struck his arm guard, but when he lifted the short sword, he discovered no damage on the arm guard. Unbelievable! He had already imbued mana into that attack, but the sword didn't even leave a scratch on the armor. I haven't even used the armor's engraved ability, but it managed to withstand the short sword's power. What if I used my rare steel sword? The rare steel sword was a relic-level weapon, and it also possessed an engraved ability which significantly increased its sharpness and power. Alaric made the same test. He swung his rare steel sword at his arm guard. Clang! Surprisingly, there was still no dent or even a scratch on the armor. This time, Alaric imbued the rare steel sword with mana, but without using the engraved ability of the sword. Clang! Alaric felt a light pain in his arm due to the impact, but there was still no damage on the armor except for a small white mark that quickly disappeared after a few seconds. What? This armor is actually capable of self-repair. This must be the new ability of the armor. He was ecstatic. Now he had more confidence in the upcoming battle. I should let my father use this armor since he will be the one fighting with that terrible monster. He thought to himself. He wasn't stupid enough to believe that he had become invincible just because he had upgraded his battle armor. The power of a goblin monarch might not be enough to break the armor, but the force would still leave him critically wounded or even kill him. After a night of rest, the elven and human warriors left the kingdom to set up the traps. They made sure that there were no goblins nearby when they were setting up everything. The elves weren't proficient in this field, so it was mostly the human warriors who did most of the work. This was because they thought that it was despicable to lay down traps. However, the elves were surprisingly amenable to the task. Perhaps their hatred for the goblins weighed heavier than keeping their chivalry. It was already nightfall when they had completed the task. Now all they needed to do was wait for the goblins to fall into their trap. At this moment, the elven warriors were hidden on top of the trees, observing the surroundings as they waited for the goblins to arrive. On the other hand, the human warriors hid behind the thick foliage while keeping their eyes peeled. A few hours later, just when midnight came, they sensed the ground trembling. They are coming. Everyone thought to themselves as they looked in the same direction. It was the entry point of the forest and also the place where the goblin army would pass by. Soon they finally caught sight of the goblin army. More and more goblin warriors entered the forest. There were so many of them that some of the wild beasts inhabiting the forest left in fear. Hidden behind a big tree, Alaric sent a signal to his subordinates. Their task was to provoke the goblins and make them rush over to their location. After getting his signal, hundreds of human warriors knocked their arrows and released them. Su, 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 su. In the next moment, the rain of arrows descended from the sky, killing dozens of unlucky goblin warriors on the spot. The goblin army was startled, and there was a moment of confusion on their side which caused them to lose more warriors. The goblin monarchs immediately stepped out to quell the confusion. They commanded the goblin warriors to charge forward and avenge their brethren. The weird squeaking noises of the goblins echoed through the forest, chilling the hearts of the human and elven warriors. Everyone hardened their hearts, forcing themselves to calm down. Suddenly, huge holes appeared on the ground, causing hundreds of goblins to fall where sharp spikes were waiting for them at the bottom. Ayik! The goblins emitted pained squeaks and squeals, but this didn't stop their army from charging towards the human warriors hidden in the dense vegetation. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.